"You don't have money for this," the doctor sneered as he turned away a sick child. But when the single mom whispered her father's name, the entire hospital froze, because her family built it. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Thunder crackled overhead as Sarah Hayes gripped the steering wheel of her aging sedan, her knuckles white with tension. Rain pelted against the windshield in heavy sheets, making it difficult to see the road ahead. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to the rearview mirror, checking on Lily, who lay sprawled across the back seat, her small face flushed with fever. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Sarah called out, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Hot, Mommy," Lily whimpered. "Everything hurts." Sarah's heart clenched at the weakness in her daughter's voice. The thermometer had read 103.8 degrees before they left their small apartment, and that was high enough to send waves of panic through her tired body. She'd just finished a double shift at the diner, her feet aching in her worn sneakers, when she'd found Lily burning up in her bed. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, fighting against the downpour. Sarah leaned forward, squinting through the blur of rain and the glare of oncoming headlights. Her old car shuddered as she pressed harder on the accelerator. "We're almost there, baby. Just hold on." The words caught in her throat as she swerved to avoid a deep puddle. The tires splashed through standing water, and the car hydroplaned slightly before she regained control. Lightning flashed, illuminating Lily's reflection in the mirror. Her daughter's usually bouncy curls lay flat against her forehead, damp with sweat. The little girl's favorite purple pajamas, decorated with dancing unicorns, were twisted around her small frame as she tossed restlessly. Sarah's mind raced with worry about more than just the fever. Her wallet held exactly $23.48, all that remained after paying the rent and utilities. The credit card was maxed out, and payday was still 4 days away. But none of that mattered now. She'd figure something out. She always did. "Mommy?" Lily's voice quavered. "I feel sick." Sarah quickly pulled over to the shoulder of the road, her hazard lights blinking in the darkness. She scrambled out into the rain, yanking open the back door just in time for Lily to be sick. Sarah held her daughter's hair back with one hand while rubbing gentle circles on her back with the other, rain soaking through her thin waitress uniform. "It's okay, baby. It's all okay," she murmured, though her own hands were shaking. The storm raged around them, but Sarah barely noticed the cold rain running down her face, mixing with the tears she couldn't hold back. Once Lily finished, Sarah used a tissue from her purse to wipe her daughter's mouth and helped her take small sips from a water bottle. The little girl's skin burned against her touch, and Sarah's anxiety spiked higher. Back behind the wheel, Sarah's wet clothes clung uncomfortably to her body as she merged back onto the road. The hospital was only 10 minutes away now, but every second felt like an eternity. Her mind wandered to her father. How different things would be if he were still alive. He would have known exactly what to do, would have made everything better with his calm presence and gentle wisdom. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Sarah finally spotted the hospital's emergency room sign glowing like a beacon in the darkness. She pulled up to the entrance, tires splashing through deep puddles. "We're here, Lily. We're here." Sarah threw the car into park and rushed to the back door, gathering her daughter into her arms. Lily felt like a furnace against her chest, the child's head lolling weakly against her shoulder. The automatic doors whooshed open as Sarah burst into the bright fluorescent lights of the ER lobby, her wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor. "Please," she called out, her voice cracking with desperation. "My daughter! She's burning up! Please help us!" 2 nurses looked up from the intake desk, their expressions shifting from routine attention to concern as they took in the sight of the soaking wet mother and the clearly ill child in her arms. "Her fever's so high," Sarah continued, her words tumbling out in a rush as she approached the desk. "She was sick on the way here. I didn't know what else to do." Her legs trembled with exhaustion and fear as she held Lily tighter, feeling her daughter's rapid breathing against her neck. One of the nurses quickly came around the desk, gesturing toward the intake area. "This way, ma'am. We'll get her checked in right away." Sarah followed, her wet clothes leaving a trail of water drops on the floor, her heart pounding with equal measures of relief and dread. Help was here, but what would it cost? How would she manage? For now, she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing only on the precious weight of her sick child in her arms and the desperate need to make her better. Sarah sat in the hard plastic chair of the intake cubicle, her legs bouncing nervously as she cradled Lily against her chest. The 6-year-old's skin burned against her mother's neck, her usually bright eyes now glassy and unfocused. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the emergency room made Lily look even paler than she was, her dark curls damp with sweat. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I need your insurance information," the receptionist said, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her name tag read Nancy, and though her tone was kind, her words made Sarah's stomach twist into knots. I lost my coverage last month," Sarah admitted, her voice trembling. She shifted Lily in her arms, trying to make her daughter more comfortable. "I've been picking up extra shifts at the diner, but I haven't been able to afford new insurance yet. Please, my daughter's fever is so high." Nancy's expression softened with sympathy, but before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air like ice. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah turned to see a tall man in a white coat approaching the desk. His steel-gray eyes were cold and clinical as they swept over her and Lily. The name embroidered on his coat read, Dr. Nathan Cole. Nancy cleared her throat. "Dr. Cole, this is Miss Hayes and her daughter. The little one has a high fever, but there's an insurance situation." "How high?" Dr. Cole interrupted, directing his question at Sarah. 103.8 when I checked at home," Sarah answered quickly. "That was 30 minutes ago. She's been getting worse, and she's barely responding to me now." She could hear the desperation in her own voice. Dr. Cole's face remained impassive as he picked up the intake form, scanning it with apparent disdain. "No insurance. Minimum wage job." He looked up at Sarah, his expression hardening. "You don't have money for this. Take her elsewhere." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Please," she whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. "I can set up a payment plan. I'll work extra shifts. I'll do anything." "The free clinic on 5th Street opens at 8 tomorrow morning," Dr. Cole said dismissively, already turning away. "We're not running a charity here." Sarah's cheeks burned with humiliation as other patients in the waiting room pretended not to stare. Lily stirred in her arms, whimpering softly. "Mommy, I don't feel good." "I know, baby," Sarah murmured, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I know." Nancy, the receptionist, looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting between Sarah and Dr. Cole's retreating back. "Miss Hayes, maybe we could—" "It's fine," Sarah cut her off, unable to bear any more pity. Her hand shook as she gathered her purse and Lily's worn stuffed rabbit from the chair beside her. The tears she'd been holding back began to slip down her cheeks as she stood, adjusting Lily's weight in her arms. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder as Sarah took unsteady steps toward the exit. Lily's arms tightened weakly around her neck, her small body radiating heat through her princess pajamas. The same pajamas Sarah had bought at a thrift store last month, proud to have found something so nice for so little. Each step toward the automatic doors felt heavier than the last. The rain outside had settled into a steady downpour, and Sarah realized she'd left her umbrella in the car. It didn't matter now. Nothing mattered except the crushing weight of failure pressing down on her chest, the failure to provide for her daughter, to protect her, to be enough. Lily's fingers clutched weakly at Sarah's sweater. "Mommy," she mumbled against her mother's neck. "Why are we leaving?" Sarah couldn't answer past the lump in her throat. More tears spilled down her cheeks as she hitched her purse higher on her shoulder, the worn strap digging into her skin. The waiting room seemed to stretch endlessly before her, each step a reminder of her powerlessness, of the cruel reality that money mattered more than her daughter's suffering. Through her tears, she could make out the shapes of other patients watching her retreat. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others whispered behind their hands. The shame burned hotter than Lily's fever against her skin as she made her way toward the exit, her daughter's labored breathing the only sound louder than her own heartbeat. Sarah clutched Lily tighter, her shoulders hunched in defeat as she turned toward the emergency room doors. The weight of failure pressed down on her like a physical burden. Her daughter's fever radiated through their shared embrace. Each labored breath, a reminder of her inability to provide the care Lily desperately needed. Nurse Evelyn Carter stood at her station, watching the scene unfold with growing discomfort. In her 25 years at Memorial Hospital, She'd never felt more conflicted about hospital policy. The mother's desperation was painfully evident in every movement, every hitched breath as she fought back tears. As they passed the nurse's station, Lily lifted her head weakly from her mother's shoulder. Her small face was flushed with fever, but her eyes found Nurse Carter's. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "But Mommy says Grandpa built this hospital." Evelyn froze, her hands suspended over the patient chart she'd been organizing. The words hit her like a physical shock, sending her mind racing back through decades of hospital history. "Wait," she called out, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the ER. "Please wait a moment." Sarah paused, turning back slowly. The defeat in her eyes had been replaced by something else, a flicker of confusion, perhaps even hope. "Did you say your grandfather built this hospital?" Evelyn asked, stepping out from behind the counter. She approached them carefully, as if afraid they might bolt. "What was his name?" Sarah swallowed hard, adjusting Lily in her arms. "Robert Hayes," she said quietly. "He founded Memorial Hospital 40 years ago." The name sent a jolt through Evelyn. Her eyes widened as she studied Sarah's face more carefully, searching for traces of the man she'd known in her early nursing days. "Robert Hayes," she repeated, her voice thick with recognition. "Of course! Those eyes! You have his eyes!" Other nurses had begun to gather, drawn by the sudden intensity of the conversation. An older orderly gasped softly, recognition dawning on his face. "I worked with your father when I was just starting out," Evelyn said, her voice gentle but urgent. He was the most compassionate administrator this hospital ever had. He knew every employee by name, visited patients personally." She trailed off, emotion making her voice catch. Sarah's lips trembled as she nodded. "He always said healthcare was about people, not profits." Her voice was barely audible, but in the now hushed ER, everyone heard. Lily stirred in her mother's arms, whimpering softly. The sound seemed to galvanize Nurse Carter into action. "Jenny," she called to a younger nurse, "please escort Miss Hayes and Lily to the private waiting room in the East Wing, the one with the comfortable chairs." The whispers had already started, spreading through the ER like ripples in a pond. "Hayes, Robert Hayes' daughter? I remember him." Whatever happened to the family after? Sarah found herself being gently guided away from the main waiting area, through double doors and down a quieter hallway. The younger nurse, Jenny, kept glancing at her with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Behind them, they could hear Nurse Carter's authoritative voice, "Get me Dr. Martinez, and someone pull up the founding documents, now." The private waiting room was indeed more comfortable, with soft lighting and plush chairs instead of the harsh institutional seating in the main area. As Sarah sank into one of the armchairs, still cradling Lily, she could hear the murmur of voices in the hallway growing louder, more urgent. Hospital staff members kept finding reasons to pass by the waiting room's glass windows, stealing glances at the mother and daughter. Each time someone walked by, their pace would slow and their eyes would linger. Some of the older staff members stopped completely, their faces showing recognition and something that looked almost like shame. Lily curled closer into her mother's embrace, her small hands clutching Sarah's worn jacket. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice raspy with fever. "Did I say something wrong?" Sarah stroked her daughter's damp curls, tears threatening to spill over. "No, baby," she whispered back. "You said exactly the right thing, just like always." She pressed a kiss to Lily's burning forehead, remembering all the stories her father had told her about the hospital, about his dream of creating a place where everyone could receive care, regardless of their ability to pay. Through the glass, she could see Nurse Carter moving purposefully through the hallway, speaking intensely with other staff members. Papers were being passed from hand to hand, and heads were nodding emphatically. The whispers had grown into a steady buzz of conversation, punctuated by occasional exclamations of surprise or recognition. An older nurse walked past, then stopped and backed up, staring through the window. Sarah recognized the look of revelation on her face. Another person who had known her father, who remembered what the hospital had once been. The woman pressed her hand to her mouth, then hurried away, presumably to spread the word further. Sarah could feel the atmosphere of the hospital shifting around her, like a change in air pressure before a storm. The revelation of her identity seemed to be awakening something in the hospital's collective memory, a reminder of its original purpose, of the principles it had been founded upon. Lily's breathing had grown slightly easier as they sat in the quiet room, though her fever still burned hot. Sarah rocked her gently, the way she had when Lily was a baby, trying to soothe them both. The weight of her father's legacy, which she had carried silently for so long, suddenly felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. Through the windows, she could see more and more staff members gathering in small groups, gesturing and talking in animated whispers. Every few moments, someone would glance toward their room, their expressions a mix of curiosity, recognition, and what looked like renewed purpose. The murmurs continued to ripple through the ER, growing stronger with each passing moment. Sarah could feel the change in the air, the shift in energy as her father's name passed from person to person, awakening old memories and forgotten promises. She held Lily closer, waiting to see what would happen next, hoping that somehow her father's spirit of compassion might still have the power to open doors that had been closed to them just moments before. Nurse Evelyn led Sarah and Lily into a quiet waiting room, away from the bustling emergency department. The small space felt intimate, with soft blue walls and comfortable chairs that seemed to embrace their occupants. A single lamp cast a warm glow across the room, making it feel less clinical than the harsh fluorescent lights of the main lobby. Lily curled up in her mother's lap, her cheeks still flushed with fever. Sarah ran her fingers through her daughter's damp hair, humming softly to comfort her. The little girl's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she managed a weak smile when Nurse Evelyn returned carrying a thick manila folder. "I found it in the archives," Evelyn said, her voice gentle as she sat down beside them. She opened the folder carefully, revealing a photograph that made Sarah's breath catch. There, smiling up from the yellowed page, was her father's face, Robert Hayes, looking exactly as she remembered him. That's him," Sarah whispered, her finger tracing the edge of the photograph. In the image, Robert stood proud in front of the hospital's main entrance, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners just the way they always did when he smiled. This was taken at the opening ceremony. Lily stirred in her lap, peering at the photograph with interest despite her illness. "Is that Grandpa?" she asked in a small voice. "Yes, sweetheart. That's your grandfather." Sarah's voice wavered slightly. "He built this whole hospital." Nurse Evelyn studied the photograph, then looked at Sarah with newfound understanding. "I remember him, you know. I was just starting my career when he was still here. He used to walk these halls every morning, greeting everyone by name, from the chief surgeon to the cleaning staff." Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. That was Dad. He believed everyone who worked here was equally important to making the hospital work. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "He passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. It happened so fast." "I remember when we lost him," Evelyn said softly. "The whole hospital mourned, but I never knew he had a daughter." "How?" "I was away when it happened," Sarah explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Teaching in another state. By the time I got back, everything had changed. The board. They'd already taken control. New investors, new policies." She stroked Lily's hair absently. "They made it clear there was no place for me here anymore." Evelyn's face darkened. "That's not right. This hospital was your father's dream. He built it to serve everyone in this community, regardless of their ability to pay." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "But the board, they had other ideas, more profitable ones." She looked down at Lily, who had dozed off in her arms. "I never fought it. Maybe I should have, but I was dealing with so much at the time. My husband had just left. I was pregnant with Lily." She trailed off, lost in painful memories. "Your father used to say that healing wasn't just about medicine," Evelyn remembered, her voice taking on a faraway quality. "He said it was about treating people with dignity, about giving them hope when they needed it most." Sarah smiled through her tears. "He used to tell me that every night at dinner." "Sarah," he'd say, "remember that everyone who walks through those hospital doors is someone's loved one. Treat them all like family." Nurse Evelyn stood up suddenly, her expression determined. "Well, you're family, Sarah, you and Lily both, and we're going to make sure she gets the care she needs right now." She moved to the door and spoke quietly to another nurse who was passing by. The younger woman nodded and hurried off down the hallway. Evelyn turned back to Sarah, her face softening as she watched the young mother holding her sick child. "Dr. Peterson is on call tonight. She's one of our best pediatricians. I've asked them to prepare an examination room." Evelyn's voice was warm but professional. We'll get Lily's temperature down and run some tests to make sure everything's okay." Relief flooded through Sarah's body, making her feel weak. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how I'll ever repay." "Don't think about that right now," Evelyn interrupted gently. "Your father's hospital has an endowment fund for cases exactly like this. We'll figure everything out later." Sarah nodded, grateful beyond words. She gathered Lily closer, the little girl barely stirring in her feverish sleep. The weight of her daughter in her arms felt different now. Less like a burden, and more like a precious connection to her father's legacy. Evelyn was making notes in a fresh chart when a sharp knock at the door made them both look up. A young nurse poked her head in, her expression anxious. "Miss Carter, administration is asking about the situation. They want to know about the Hayes family members in the ER." The warmth in the room seemed to dim slightly. Evelyn straightened her shoulders, her pen pausing mid-sentence. "Tell them Dr. Peterson is examining the patient shortly. I'll update them on the situation myself." The door closed quietly, but the peaceful atmosphere had shifted. Sarah could feel tension creeping back into her muscles, remembering all too well the cold efficiency of the hospital's current leadership. Evelyn touched her arm reassuringly. "Don't worry about them right now. Let's focus on getting Lily the care she needs first." Sarah watched as Dr. Wilson, a kind-faced pediatrician, examined Lily in one of the emergency department's curtained areas. Her daughter's small hand gripped her favorite stuffed rabbit while the doctor listened to her breathing. The relief of finally getting medical attention made Sarah's shoulders relax slightly. "Mrs. Hayes?" A stern voice cut through her moment of peace. Sarah turned to see a woman in a tailored business suit standing at the entrance to the treatment area. "I'm Jennifer Morton, the hospital board secretary. The board would like to speak with you immediately." Sarah glanced uncertainly at Lily. Dr. Wilson gave her a reassuring nod. "Don't worry. We'll take good care of her. She's in safe hands." Sarah squeezed Lily's hand. "Mommy will be right back, sweetie. Dr. Wilson is going to help you feel better." "Promise you'll come back soon?" Lily's voice was small and tired. "I promise." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, still burning with fever, before following Jennifer through a maze of corridors. The executive wing was nothing like the worn linoleum floors of the emergency department. Thick carpet muffled their footsteps, and oil paintings lined the walls. Sarah's chest tightened as they approached a set of heavy wooden doors. This part of the hospital felt alien to her now, though she'd spent countless hours here as a child, visiting her father at work. Jennifer opened the doors to reveal a long conference table surrounded by men and women in expensive suits. Their faces were as cold as the marble conference table between them. Sarah recognized a few from newspaper photos, venture capitalists who'd taken control of the hospital board after her father's death. "Please, sit down," said Marcus Sterling, the board chairman. His voice carried none of the warmth the word "please" suggested. Sarah took a seat, painfully aware of her wrinkled scrubs from her shift at the diner and her messy ponytail. "Miss Hayes," Sterling began, folding his hands on the table, "your presence here tonight is causing quite a disruption." "I'm here because my daughter needs medical care," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nothing more. Let's be clear," a woman with steel gray hair cut in. "This institution is no longer your family's private charity project. We've transformed it into a modern medical center of excellence." Sarah's cheeks burned. "My father built this hospital to serve everyone in the community, rich or poor. Your father's idealistic approach nearly bankrupted this institution," Sterling interrupted. "We saved it, modernized it, made it profitable." "Profitable?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Is that why Dr. Cole tried to turn away my sick child? Because she wasn't profitable enough?" A man with wire-rimmed glasses cleared his throat. "You have no claim here, Miss Hayes. No ownership, no say in hospital policy. Your father's estate sold all controlling interests years ago." "After he died," Sarah said quietly, "when I was barely 20, dealing with funeral arrangements and a newborn." "The timing is irrelevant," Sterling said dismissively. "The point is, you can't waltz in here trading on your father's name. This isn't your hospital anymore." Sarah's hands trembled in her lap. She thought of her father's gentle smile, his endless hours treating patients who couldn't pay, his absolute conviction that healthcare was a right, not a privilege. "My father's name is still on the cornerstone of this building. A historical artifact," the gray-haired woman said with a wave of her hand. "Nothing more." "We've been more than generous," Sterling added. We've allowed your daughter to be seen tonight, despite your financial situation. But this ends here. You are not to make scenes in our emergency department. You are not to discuss your father or your family's past connection to this institution with our staff. Sarah stood up slowly, her legs unsteady. My 6-year-old daughter is running a dangerous fever. She needed help. That's all I came here for. Help, just like every other parent who walks through those emergency room doors. And she's receiving treatment, Sterling said coldly. Consider it a courtesy. But after tonight, you'll need to find medical care elsewhere. We can't have you disrupting our operations or confusing our staff about who's really in charge here. The tears Sarah had been holding back threatened to spill over. My father would be heartbroken to see what you've done to his legacy. Your father's legacy is irrelevant, Sterling snapped. We're running a business here, not a charity. Jennifer will show you out. Sarah turned and walked to the door, her back straight, despite the weight of their cold stares. As she stepped into the hallway, she heard Sterling speaking to Jennifer through the partially open door. Make sure all department heads understand. She's to be treated like any other non-paying patient. No special treatment. No access beyond the bare minimum required by law. If she causes any more disruptions, she's to be removed from the premises immediately. Jennifer's heels clicked on the marble floor as she hurried to catch up with Sarah. I'll escort you back to the emergency department, she said stiffly. Sarah walked beside her in silence, each step feeling heavier than the last. The pristine executive wing gave way to the medical floors, where the real work of healing happened. Or at least where it used to happen, when her father's compassionate spirit still filled these halls. She thought of the small brass plaque that used to hang in the main lobby. Founded by Robert Hayes, a home of healing for all. She hadn't seen it in years. She wondered if they'd thrown it away, along with everything else her father had built his life believing in. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the small hospital room as Sarah sat beside Lily's bed, her thumb gently stroking her daughter's warm hand. The evening light filtered through thin curtains, casting long shadows across the sterile floor. Lily's fever hadn't broken yet, but at least she was resting more comfortably now, her chest rising and falling in steady breaths. Sarah's other hand absently smoothed the wrinkles in the thin hospital blanket. The events of the day felt surreal. From the terrifying drive to the hospital to the humiliation at the front desk, and then the shocking confrontation in the boardroom. Her father's hospital, the place he'd poured his heart and soul into building, now felt like hostile territory. The door clicked open, and Dr. Nathan Cole strode in, his white coat pristine, a tablet computer held like a shield in front of him. His face was carefully blank, professional to the point of coldness. Sarah straightened in her chair but didn't let go of Lily's hand. Mrs. Hayes, he said, his voice clipped. I'm here to check on the patient's status. Her name is Lily, Sarah said quietly, but firmly. And she's not just a patient. She's my daughter. Nathan's lips tightened as he tapped at his tablet. Her temperature is still elevated at 102.3. The blood work shows signs of infection. He rattled off numbers and medical terms without making eye contact, speaking as if Sarah wasn't even in the room. Will she be okay? Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Nathan finally looked at her, his gray eyes hard. We're administering appropriate antibiotics. However, I should remind you that extended stays can be costly. The threat in his words was barely veiled. Sarah's free hand clenched in her lap. My father would never have turned away a sick child. Your father is no longer here, Nathan said coldly. And modern hospitals can't run on good intentions alone. There are protocols, procedures. And profits? Sarah cut in, keeping her voice low for Lily's sake. Is that what this hospital is about now? What happened to healing hands, caring hearts? She quoted her father's motto, the words that used to hang in the hospital lobby. A muscle twitched in Nathan's jaw. Times change, Mrs. Hayes. The board has modernized. You mean they've forgotten what really matters? Sarah interrupted again. She looked down at Lily's peaceful face, then back at Nathan. Did you know my father used to spend hours with every new doctor he hired? He wanted to make sure they understood that medicine wasn't just about treating symptoms. It was about treating people. Something flickered in Nathan's expression. So brief, Sarah almost missed it. He shifted his weight, adjusting his grip on the tablet. Your father's methods were admirable but unsustainable in today's healthcare environment. That's not true, Sarah said, her voice strengthening. Compassion doesn't bankrupt hospitals, Dr. Cole. Greed does. Nathan's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of anger. You don't understand the complexities. I understand perfectly, Sarah said. I understand that somewhere along the way this hospital lost its soul. And now you're all so worried about bottom lines that you've forgotten why my father built this place. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, and Sarah automatically reached to smooth her daughter's hair. The tender gesture seemed to make Nathan uncomfortable. He took a step back, clutching his tablet tighter. Your father's era is over, Mrs. Hayes, he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. The board has made their position clear. I suggest you focus on your daughter's immediate medical needs and leave hospital policy to those qualified to manage it. Sarah met his gaze steadily. My father believed everyone was qualified to care, Dr. Cole. Even you, though you seem to have forgotten how. Nathan's shoulders stiffened. For a moment, he looked like he might argue further, but instead, he turned toward the door. A nurse will be in shortly to check her vitals, he said tersely, then left the room with quick steps. The door clicked shut behind him, and Sarah let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Lily mumbled something in her sleep, turning slightly toward her mother. Sarah leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead. I won't let them erase what Grandpa built, she whispered, her words both a promise and a prayer. Lily's only response was the steady rhythm of her breathing as she drifted deeper into sleep. Sarah sat back in her chair, her spine straight despite her exhaustion. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders, but she refused to bend under it. In the quiet of the hospital room, with her daughter's hand in hers, she felt her determination solidify like steel. The morning sun streamed through the hospital's basement windows, casting thin bars of light across rows of metal filing cabinets. Sarah stood in the doorway of the archives, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. Her eyes were heavy from a restless night spent in the uncomfortable chair beside Lily's bed. But determination kept her going. Mrs. Hayes? A gentle voice called out. An older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes emerged from behind a tall shelf. I'm Martha. I've worked in these archives for 20 years. She smiled warmly. I knew your father. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. You did? Martha nodded, adjusting her reading glasses. Robert Hayes was a good man, the best administrator this hospital ever had. She glanced around conspiratorially before lowering her voice. I heard what happened yesterday, those board members. She shook her head disapprovingly. They've forgotten what this place stands for. That's why I'm here, Sarah said, straightening her shoulders. There has to be something. Documents, letters, anything that shows what Dad wanted for this hospital. Martha's eyes lit up. Follow me. They wound their way through narrow aisles of filing cabinets and shelves packed with dusty boxes. The smell of old paper and forgotten memories filled the air. Martha stopped at a section marked Administrative Records, 1,992,000. Your father kept meticulous records, Martha explained, pulling out a heavy cardboard box. The board may have taken over, but they couldn't throw away the official documents. Hospital regulations. She winked. Sarah set her coffee aside and helped Martha lower the box onto a small desk. Dust puffed up as they opened it, making them both cough. Inside, folders and loose papers were crammed together, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. I'll leave you to it, Martha said, patting Sarah's shoulder. Take your time. If anyone asks, you're doing research for the hospital's anniversary celebration. Sarah smiled gratefully. Thank you, Martha. Alone with the box, Sarah began her search. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the first folder. Board meeting minutes, budget reports, and staff memos filled page after page. She scanned each document carefully, looking for anything that might help. Hours passed. Sarah's back ached from hunching over the desk, and her eyes burned from reading countless pages of small print. She was halfway through the box when something caught her eye, a worn leather journal tucked between two manila folders. Her breath caught in her throat. She recognized the journal immediately. It was the one her father always carried in his coat pocket, the one he used to jot down his thoughts and ideas. Sarah had assumed it was lost after his death. With trembling fingers, she opened the journal. Her father's familiar handwriting filled the pages, the ink slightly faded but still clear. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read. A hospital isn't just a building of bricks and mortar. It's a sanctuary of healing, A place where hope lives. Every child who comes through these doors deserves care, regardless of what their parents can pay. This is my solemn vow, to create a place where no child is turned away, where healing isn't measured in dollars but in smiles restored and lives saved. Sarah's vision blurred as she turned page after page. Her father's passion and purpose jumped from every entry. He wrote about late-night visits to check on sick children, about setting up payment plans for struggling families, about his dream of expanding the children's ward. Then she found it. Tucked between the journal's pages was a folded document covered in her father's distinctive handwriting. Sarah carefully opened it, her heart pounding. The paper was dated just months before his death, outlining his vision for the hospital's future. The children's ward must remain accessible to all, he had written, the words underlined firmly. No child shall be denied treatment based on financial status. This is not merely a suggestion, but a fundamental principle upon which this hospital was built and must continue to operate. Sarah's hands shook as she held the papers. Here was proof, clear, unmistakable proof of her father's intentions. His words reached across time, speaking truth to power, defending the vulnerable just as he had always done in life. She pressed the papers to her chest, feeling closer to her father than she had in years. These weren't just documents, they were his legacy. His heart poured out in ink and paper. They were exactly what she needed to fight back against the board's coldness, to remind them of the hospital's true purpose. Martha appeared at the end of the aisle, concern etched on her face. "Everything all right, dear?" Sarah nodded, carefully holding the precious papers. She had found what she came for, not just evidence, but her father's voice, still fighting for what was right. In these dusty archives, surrounded by the weight of history, she had uncovered treasure beyond measure. "I found him," she whispered, clutching the papers tightly. "I found my dad." Martha's warm smile faded as footsteps echoed through the archive room. Sarah turned to find Dr. Nathan Cole standing in the doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. His face was set in its usual stern expression, but something else flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps even uncertainty. "This area is restricted to hospital staff," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "You shouldn't be down here." Sarah straightened her spine, though her hands trembled slightly as she held her father's papers. "I have every right to be here. These are my father's records." Martha stepped forward, her chin raised. "Dr. Cole, I invited Mrs. Hayes down here myself. There's nothing improper about a daughter wanting to learn about her father's legacy." Nathan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the papers in Sarah's hands, then at the open boxes on the table. "The board won't appreciate you digging through old files." "The board?" Sarah's voice rose slightly. "The same board that's trying to erase everything my father built? Everything he believed in?" She gestured to the documents spread across the table. "He wanted this hospital to help everyone, Dr. Cole, not just the wealthy." "Your father's intentions, however noble, aren't relevant to modern healthcare economics," Nathan replied. But his voice held less conviction than usual. He moved closer, picking up one of the yellowed papers. His eyes scanned the neat handwriting, and something in his expression shifted. "I remember this," he said quietly, almost to himself. "This scholarship program." Sarah watched as color drained from his face. He set the paper down carefully, as if it might burn him. "What is it?" she asked, curiosity temporarily overwhelming her anger. Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that made him seem suddenly human, less like the cold doctor who had dismissed her in the ER. "Your father, he funded my medical school education." The words came out rough, reluctant. "I was from a poor family in South Side. No one would give me a chance, except him." Sarah stared at him, pieces clicking into place. "You were one of his scholarship students?" "The first one." Nathan wouldn't meet her eyes. He picked up another document, his fingers tracing the edges. "I worked as a janitor here during high school. Your father found me studying medical textbooks during my breaks." A bitter laugh escaped him. "He said he saw potential in me." Martha had quietly retreated to her desk, giving them privacy, but Sarah could see her watching with knowing eyes. "If my father helped you," Sarah said slowly, "how can you stand by while they destroy everything he worked for?" Nathan's shoulders tensed. "It's not that simple." "It seems pretty simple to me," Sarah countered. "You're choosing money over mercy. Is that what my father's investment was for?" The word struck home. Nathan flinched as if she'd slapped him. You don't understand the pressures, the reality of running a modern hospital. No, I understand perfectly, Sarah cut in. You've forgotten where you came from. You've forgotten what it's like to need help and have doors slammed in your face. She gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. My father saw something in you, Dr. Cole. I wonder what he'd think of what you've become. Shame flickered across Nathan's face, cracking his professional mask. For a moment, Sarah glimpsed something vulnerable in his eyes, something that reminded her of the poor boy her father must have met all those years ago. Your father was a good man, Nathan said finally, his voice rough. But good men don't always survive in this world. They do, if other good people stand up for what's right, Sarah replied. She tucked the papers into her bag, her hands steady now. Thank you for your help, Martha. As she walked past Nathan, he spoke again, so quietly she almost missed it. I'm sorry about your daughter. Sarah paused at the door, studying him. The morning sun caught his face, highlighting the shadows under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. For the first time, she wondered if his coldness wasn't armor but a prison of his own making. Prove it, she said simply, and left him standing among the ghosts of his past. Sarah walked slowly through the basement corridor, her mind churning. The doctor who had dismissed her so cruelly was also the boy her father had believed in, had given a chance when no one else would. The discovery should have made her angrier, should have cemented her distrust. Instead, it left her feeling strangely unsettled. She remembered her father saying that people were rarely all good or all bad. They were just human, capable of both cruelty and kindness, depending on the choices they made. The shame in Nathan's voice when he spoke of her father's help had been real. The question was, would he choose to remember that shame, or bury it again under layers of professional detachment? Sarah pressed the elevator button, holding her father's papers close. She didn't trust Nathan Cole, not yet. But perhaps there was still a trace of that scholarship student in him, that boy her father had seen promise in. Perhaps that boy wasn't completely lost after all. Sarah sat in the small waiting area outside Lily's room, exhausted from another night of watching over her daughter. The morning light filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the vinyl floor. She rubbed her tired eyes, trying to stay alert despite having barely slept. Mrs. Hayes? A gentle voice caught her attention. She looked up to see an older nurse with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. The name tag read, Evelyn Carter. I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to share something with you. Nurse Carter settled into the chair beside her, smoothing her crisp white uniform. I worked here when your father was running things. 25 years, if you can believe it. Sarah straightened, suddenly more alert. You knew my father? Oh, yes. Evelyn's eyes crinkled with warmth. He wasn't like other hospital administrators. Every morning, rain or shine, he'd walk these halls. Knew everyone's name, even the janitors and cafeteria workers. That sounds like Dad, Sarah whispered, her throat tight with emotion. He used to visit patients who had no family, Evelyn continued. I remember one Christmas Eve. He stayed for hours with an elderly man who was all alone, just sitting there, talking and praying with him. As if Evelyn's story had opened a floodgate, more staff members began appearing throughout the morning. A maintenance worker named Joe stopped by to tell Sarah how Robert Hayes had helped pay for his son's college tuition. A cafeteria worker remembered how he always insisted on eating lunch in the staff break room instead of his office. Your father made this place feel like family, said Maria, a respiratory therapist who'd been there 15 years. He knew every child's name in the pediatric ward. Sometimes he'd bring his guitar and sing silly songs to make them laugh. Sarah wiped away tears as she listened. Each story painted a picture of the father she remembered. Humble, generous, always putting others first. More than that, they showed her how deeply his spirit still lived in these halls, despite the board's attempts to change everything. By mid-morning, Nurse Carter returned with several others, including some longtime volunteers. They gathered around Sarah, sharing coffee and memories. Remember how he'd pray with families in the chapel? One volunteer said. Didn't matter what faith they were. He just wanted them to know they weren't alone. And those Christmas parties he organized for the kids who couldn't go home for the holidays, another added. My goodness, the decorations would be everywhere. Sarah found herself smiling through her tears. He used to dress up as Santa, she shared. He'd stuff pillows under his red suit and practice his ho-ho-ho for weeks. The group laughed softly, mindful of nearby patients. Then a young nurse spoke up hesitantly. "Mrs. Hayes? We heard about the fundraiser this weekend. The board's bringing in all these wealthy donors. They want to show off their new vision for the hospital," Evelyn added, her voice tight with disapproval. As if the old vision wasn't good enough, Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. "I've been thinking about that fundraiser," she admitted, "about speaking there." The group fell silent, exchanging glances. Finally, Evelyn reached over and squeezed her hand. "Your father would be proud. But honey, are you sure? The board won't like it." Sarah looked around at these people who'd known and loved her father, who still carried his spirit of compassion despite the changes forced upon them. She thought of Lily in her hospital bed, and all the other children who might be turned away if things continued as they were. "I have to try," she said firmly. "Dad always said this hospital was meant to be a place of healing for everyone, not just the wealthy. Someone needs to remind them of that." The staff members nodded in understanding and support. One by one, they shared words of encouragement and promises to be there when she spoke. "We'll be right there with you," Evelyn assured her. "Your father's legacy isn't just in these buildings. It's in all of us who remember what this place is supposed to be about." Sarah felt strength flowing into her from their support. The fear was still there. She'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but now it was overshadowed by determination. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes doing what's right means doing what's scary." As the group dispersed back to their duties, Sarah remained in her chair, clutching the coffee cup that had long since gone cold. The stories they'd shared had painted such a vivid picture of her father, not just as the hospital founder, but as a man who truly lived his values. She might have lost him years ago, but his spirit was still very much alive in these halls. Her decision was made. This weekend, she would stand up and speak for everything he believed in. She would be her father's voice. Sarah smoothed her simple navy dress, a thrift store find she'd carefully pressed for tonight. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edges of the wooden podium, facing the sea of faces in the hospital's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, illuminating tables draped in white linens where doctors, board members, and wealthy donors sat in expectant silence. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Dr. Nathan Cole standing near the back wall, his arms crossed. His presence made her heart race faster, but she forced herself to focus on the worn index cards in front of her. "Good evening," she began, her voice shakier than she'd hoped. "My name is Sarah Hayes." She paused, drawing a deep breath. "And my father was Robert Hayes." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Several older staff members leaned forward in their seats, recognition dawning on their faces. "Many of you knew my father as the founder of this hospital, but I knew him as the man who would wake up at 2 a.m. to drive across town when a neighbor's child was sick." Her voice grew stronger as memories flooded back. The man who kept a jar of lollipops in his coat pocket, not just for his young patients, but for their worried siblings in the waiting room. In the back, Nathan uncrossed his arms, his stern expression softening slightly. Dad believed that healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about dignity, compassion, hope. Sarah pulled out a worn photograph from her pocket. This picture was taken the day the hospital opened. "See that little girl in pigtails hiding behind his leg? That was me." She held up the photo, showing her father's beaming face as he cut the ribbon. "But what you can't see in this picture is what he whispered to me that morning. He said, 'Sarah Bear, we're building more than walls here. We're building a home where every scared parent, every sick child, every hurting soul will find shelter.'" Tears pricked at her eyes, but Sarah blinked them back. "Last week, I brought my own daughter, Lily, to this emergency room. She was burning with fever, and I was terrified." Her gaze briefly met Nathan's. "I was turned away because I couldn't afford the treatment." Uncomfortable murmurs filled the room. Several board members shifted in their seats. "But that's not my father's hospital," Sarah continued, her voice growing passionate. "I've spent the past few days in the archives, reading his original mission statement. Reading letters from families whose lives were changed because Robert Hayes believed that healing shouldn't come with a price tag." She pulled out a yellowed document. "This is Dad's original charter. It states clearly that no child should ever be turned away for lack of funds. That was his dream, his promise to this community." Sarah's voice grew stronger, filling the ballroom. "I'm not here tonight asking for special treatment. I'm here to remind us all of the foundation this hospital was built on. My father's legacy isn't in these walls or marble floors. It's in every life touched by compassion, every child healed, every family given hope. She gestured to the nursing staff gathered at one table. It lives on in the nurses who still slip extra pudding cups to scared kids, in the janitors who know every patient's name, in the volunteers who hold lonely hands. Heads nodded throughout the room. Several older donors dabbed at their eyes. My father used to say that true healing happens when medicine and mercy meet, when we remember that every patient is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's whole world. Sarah's voice softened. That's the legacy I want to protect, not for my sake, but for every parent who will walk through these doors carrying a sick child and a heavy heart. The silence in the room was profound. Sarah could feel the weight of every eye upon her, but for once, she didn't shrink from it. Tonight, as you consider your donations, I ask you to remember not just the hospital's future, but its heart. The promise my father made to this community. Because somewhere right now, there's another scared parent, another sick child, who needs more than just medicine. They need to know that compassion still has a home here. Sarah stepped back from the podium, her legs shaking. For a moment, the silence held. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to clap. Others joined in, and suddenly the entire ballroom was on its feet. The applause thundered through the room as donors stood, many with tears in their eyes. Sarah saw several reaching for their checkbooks. The hospital's chief of staff was already walking toward her with an outstretched hand. Through her tears, Sarah noticed movement at the back of the room. Dr. Nathan Cole was making his way forward, his usual mask of indifference replaced by something that looked remarkably like remorse. He reached her just as the applause began to die down. "Miss Hayes," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I owe you an apology. A deep one." He swallowed hard. "Your father gave me my chance at medical school when no one else would. I forgot that. I forgot a lot of things. But listening to you tonight," he shook his head, "I'm truly sorry." Sarah felt the first warm glow of triumph spread through her chest as she looked at the transformed faces around her. Her father's spirit was alive in this room tonight. And finally, after so long, she was home. The morning sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, casting warm patterns across Sarah's face as she walked down the corridor with a newfound lightness in her step. Last night's fundraiser success still buzzed in her veins. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, she felt like her father's daughter again, carrying his legacy forward with pride. She'd spent the night in the cramped chair beside Lily's bed, but even her stiff neck couldn't dampen her spirits. Lily had been sleeping peacefully when Sarah stepped out to grab some coffee from the nurse's station. "Morning, Carol," Sarah called out to the night shift nurse who was gathering her things to leave. But Carol's usual warm smile was replaced with a worried frown. "Sarah," Carol glanced around nervously. "Have you seen the notices?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She followed Carol's gaze to the bulletin board near the nurse's station. There, printed on stark white paper with the hospital letterhead, was an announcement that made her coffee-warmed stomach turn to ice. Notice of immediate budget realignment. Children's ward funding suspended. Effective immediately. Sarah's hands shook as she read further. Words jumped out at her. Fiscal responsibility. Temporary measure. Staff reductions pending. The coffee cup slipped from her grip, splashing across the linoleum floor. "They can't do this," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "After last night, all those donations are being held for review," Carol explained quietly, helping Sarah clean up the spilled coffee. "The board called an emergency meeting at dawn. Nobody saw this coming." Down the hall, a small group of nurses huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. One was wiping tears from her eyes. Sarah recognized her as Jenny, a pediatric nurse who'd been here for 15 years. "They're saying half the children's ward staff will be cut," Carol continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those of us who remain will have double the patient load. Some treatments are being postponed until—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Sarah's chest tightened. Postponed? But what about the children who need immediate care? They're calling it non-essential care deferment. Carol spat the words out like they tasted bitter. As if any child's care is non-essential. More staff members were gathering in small clusters throughout the ward, sharing worried looks and whispered conversations. A young resident walked past, his white coat clutched in his hands, eyes red-rimmed. Sarah overheard fragments of conversation. Entire night shift canceled. Can't believe they do this to the kids. What about the critical cases? Sarah's thoughts raced to her father. He'd built this hospital from nothing, working tirelessly to ensure that no child would ever be turned away. Now, in one cruel stroke, everything he'd stood for was being dismantled. She spotted Dr. Nathan Cole striding down the hallway, his face etched with tension. Their eyes met briefly, and she thought she saw a flicker of genuine distress cross his features before he quickly looked away, disappearing into a consultation room. A sudden, horrible thought struck her. Lily. Her daughter's treatment plan had just been approved yesterday. What would this mean for her? Sarah's feet were moving before she could think, carrying her swiftly back to Lily's room. The morning bustle of the hospital faded to white noise as panic rose in her throat. She burst through the door to find her daughter's bed surrounded by monitoring equipment, their steady beeping somehow more ominous than before. Lily lay there, her small face flushed with fever, her breathing more labored than it had been just an hour ago. The IV bag hanging beside her bed was nearly empty, and no replacement hung ready. "Baby!" Sarah rushed to her daughter's side, pressing her hand to Lily's forehead. The heat radiating from her skin sent waves of fear through Sarah's body. "Lily, sweetheart?" Lily's eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. "Mommy, don't feel good." Sarah jabbed the call button repeatedly, her other hand clutching Lily's small fingers. When Jenny appeared in the doorway, her face told Sarah everything she needed to know. "I'm so sorry," Jenny said, her voice thick with emotion. "The new protocols. They're saying we have to wait for approval before administering the next round of antibiotics. The pharmacy won't release them without." "My daughter's fever is spiking," Sarah's voice cracked. "She needs her medication now." "I know." Jenny wrung her hands helplessly. "We all know. But they've locked down everything. We can't even access basic supplies without getting clearance from the board's new oversight committee." Sarah looked back at Lily, who had drifted into a fitful sleep, her small chest rising and falling with concerning irregularity. The morning's hope had shattered completely, leaving behind only sharp-edged fear and rage. Through the window, she could see the hospital's main tower reaching toward the sky, the tower her father had built with his own hands and determination. Somewhere in that tower, people in suits were making decisions that could cost children their health, maybe even their lives. The monitoring equipment beeped a warning as Lily's fever inched higher. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she pressed a cool cloth to her daughter's forehead, knowing it wasn't enough, knowing that somewhere in this very building sat the medicine her daughter desperately needed. "Your father would never have allowed this," Jenny said softly, checking Lily's vital signs with practiced efficiency despite her own distress. "Robert Hayes built this place to help people, not to line shareholders' pockets." Sarah watched her daughter's troubled sleep, remembering all the stories her father had told her about the early days of the hospital, how he'd mortgaged everything he owned to keep it running during tough times, how he'd worked as both administrator and janitor to save money, how he'd never turned away a sick child, no matter what. Now Lily lay here, her grandfather's legacy crumbling around her, while treatment that could help her sat locked away behind bureaucratic walls. The injustice of it burned in Sarah's chest like a physical pain. Another warning beep from the monitors made both women jump. Lily's fever was still climbing, and without the proper medication, there was nothing they could do but watch and wait. The chapel sat dark and quiet, moonlight filtering through stained glass windows and painting colored shadows across empty pews. Sarah huddled in the front row, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The events of the day had shattered her hope like fragile glass. The board's cruel decision to cut funding felt like a knife twisting in her heart. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please help me find strength. I can't lose this fight. I can't lose Lily." Her hands were clasped so tight, her knuckles had gone white. A tear dropped onto them, glinting in the dim light. The wooden door creaked behind her. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes, not wanting anyone to see her cry. But footsteps approached down the aisle, steady and hesitant at the same time. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Mrs. Hayes. Nathan's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "May I join you?" Sarah nodded stiffly, sliding over on the pew. Nathan sat down, leaving careful space between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. the silence of the chapel wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. "I've failed," Nathan finally said, staring straight ahead at the altar. "Failed you. Failed your father's legacy. Failed everything he believed in." Sarah turned to look at him. In the dim light, Nathan's face seemed stripped of its usual cold mask. He looked tired, human. "I was so focused on proving myself," he continued, his voice rough with emotion, "on showing everyone that I'd earned my place here, that I wasn't just some charity case who got lucky with a scholarship." He ran a hand through his hair. "I forgot why I wanted to be a doctor in the first place." "Why did you?" Sarah asked quietly. Nathan's laugh was bitter. "Would you believe me if I said it was because of your father?" Sarah's breath caught. She waited for him to continue. "I was 16 when I met him," Nathan said. "My mother was sick, cancer. We had no money, no insurance. But your father?" He swallowed hard. "He made sure she got treatment. Sat with her, prayed with her. When she passed, he told me I had a brilliant mind and that the world needed more doctors who understood what it was like to be on the other side of poverty." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes again, but for a different reason now. "That sounds like Dad." "The scholarship he gave me changed my life," Nathan's voice cracked. "And how did I repay that debt? By becoming exactly the kind of doctor he fought against. By turning away a sick child because her mother couldn't pay." He buried his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. So deeply sorry." Sarah reached out hesitantly, touching his shoulder. "Dad always said it's never too late to remember who you really are." Nathan looked up, meeting her eyes. "I want to make this right. Help me fight them, Sarah. The board, the investors, all of them. Your father built this hospital on compassion and faith. We can't let them destroy that." Sarah pulled out a worn piece of paper from her pocket, the last note her father had written before he died. His words about serving all children, regardless of wealth, were slightly faded but still clear. "We'll need proof," she said. "Documents, records, anything that shows what Dad really wanted for this place." "I'll help you look," Nathan said firmly. "I know people in administration who might know where to search, and I'll speak up about the scholarship, about how your father changed my life. They can't ignore that." Sarah's fingers tightened on the note. For the first time since the board's announcement, she felt a spark of real hope. "Together, then?" Nathan nodded, determination replacing the guilt in his eyes. "Together. For Lily. For your father's legacy. For every child who needs help. We'll make this right." Sarah looked down at her father's handwriting, tracing the words with her finger. The paper felt warm in her hand, like it held not just ink and fiber, but the essence of her father's dreams. She gripped it tighter, drawing strength from its presence. The moonlight shifted through the stained glass, casting new patterns across the chapel floor. In the quiet sanctuary, two unlikely allies sat side by side, their shared purpose bridging the gulf between them. The battle ahead would be hard, but they were no longer fighting alone. Morning sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of the hospital's basement corridor. Sarah walked quickly beside Nathan, following the elderly clerk, Mr. Jenkins, who shuffled ahead with a ring of ancient-looking keys jangling in his trembling hands. "Nobody's been down here in years," Mr. Jenkins whispered, his voice scratchy with age. "Most folks forgot these old storage rooms even exist." Sarah's heart pounded. After their shared moment in the chapel last night, Nathan had mentioned remembering Robert Hayes keeping important documents in the hospital's original administrative section. Now, walking through these dim corridors, Sarah felt like she was stepping back in time. "Here we are." "Mr." Jenkins stopped at a heavy wooden door marked Archives, Restricted Access. His keys rattled as he worked the lock. "We've got maybe an hour before anyone notices." The door creaked open, revealing a large room filled with metal filing cabinets and towering shelves packed with boxes. The musty smell of old paper filled the air. Sarah sneezed as they entered, disturbing years of settled dust. "Your father's personal files should be in those cabinets along the back wall," Mr. Jenkins pointed with a shaky finger. "Everything from the hospital's founding years." Nathan immediately strode to the cabinets, his doctor's coat swishing as he walked. "We should split up, cover more ground. Sarah, you take the left side. I'll start on the right." Sarah nodded, already pulling open the first drawer. The folders inside were yellowed with age, their labels faded but still readable. She began scanning them quickly. Building permits, Staff records. Board minutes. Some of these dates go back 30 years, Nathan commented, rifling through his own set of files. His usual cold demeanor had softened into focused determination. Your father was incredibly organized. He believed in keeping thorough records, Sarah replied, carefully lifting out another stack of folders. He used to say that truth has a way of getting buried if you don't protect it. They worked in concentrated silence, the only sounds being shuffling paper and the occasional muffled cough from the dust. Mr. Jenkins stood guard by the door, peering nervously into the hallway every few minutes. After 20 minutes of searching, Sarah's fingers were grimy with dust, but she refused to slow down. Somewhere in these files lay the proof they needed, her father's original vision for the hospital, written in his own hand. "Wait," Nathan suddenly said, his voice sharp with interest. "Sarah, look at this." He pulled out a thick manila envelope, its seal broken but contents still intact. Inside were stacks of correspondence between Robert Hayes and various hospital board members from the early years. These letters. Nathan's eyes widened as he scanned them. Your father was fighting against privatization even back then. He kept refusing offers from corporate investors. Sarah moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The letters showed her father's passionate defense of keeping the hospital accessible to all. "He never told me about this struggle," she whispered. "There's more." Nathan pulled out another folder, this one marked Foundation Documents. "Look, drafts of the hospital's original mission statement. All of them emphasize providing care regardless of ability to pay." They were getting closer. Sarah could feel it. She turned back to her section with renewed energy, pulling open another drawer. The metal scraped loudly in the quiet room. "Hurry!" Mr. Jenkins urged from the doorway. "Morning rounds will be starting soon." Sarah's hands moved faster, sifting through file after file. Then suddenly, her fingers touched something different, a leather portfolio, hidden behind a stack of ordinary folders. Her heart leaped as she recognized her father's initials tooled into the surface. "Nathan," she called softly. "I think this is it." He was at her side in an instant as she carefully opened the portfolio. Inside, protected by a clear sleeve, was a thick document bound with a faded blue ribbon. The cover page bore an official seal and her father's bold signature. "The original hospital charter," Nathan breathed. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out clearly. "Permanent endowment established for the care of children. And treatment shall never be denied based on financial circumstances." "It's all here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything we needed. The board legally can't restrict care to children. My father made sure of it." Nathan stared at the document, his face showing a mix of awe and shame. Your father thought of everything. He built in protections that even the current board can't override. "Mr." Jenkins shuffled over to look. "Robert Hayes was a good man," he said softly. "He knew someday someone might try to change what he created. That's why he kept these documents safe." Sarah carefully slipped the charter back into its protective sleeve. This was more than just a legal document. It was proof of her father's wisdom and foresight, his determination to protect the vulnerable even after he was gone. "We need to get this to legal right away," Nathan said, his doctor's efficiency returning. "The board won't be able to ignore this." Sarah nodded, clutching the portfolio close. The weight of it felt right in her hands, like finally picking up a torch her father had left for her to find. In these musty archives, surrounded by the paper trail of his life's work, she felt closer to him than she had in years. "Thank you," she said to Mr. Jenkins as they hurried out of the storage room. The old clerk just smiled and locked the door behind them, the keys jangling one last time. The morning sun seemed brighter as they emerged from the basement, the charter secure in Sarah's arms. After all the struggles and setbacks, they had finally found what they needed. Her father's own words, sealed and signed, protecting his dream of a hospital that turned no child away. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the hospital charter, its yellowed pages protected in a clear folder. Nathan strode beside her through the maze of pristine corridors, his white coat billowing with purpose. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows, painting stripes across their determined faces. "Are you ready?" Nathan asked, pausing before the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of Lily lying pale in her hospital bed. More than ready. Without knocking, Nathan pushed open the doors. Inside, the board members sat around a gleaming mahogany table, their morning meeting interrupted by the sudden intrusion. Startled faces turned toward them, coffee cups frozen midway to lips. "Dr. Cole, Miss Hayes, this is a private meeting." "Mr. Richardson," the board chairman said sharply. His steel gray suit matched his cold eyes. "Not anymore." Nathan's voice carried across the room with authority. "We have something every person in this room needs to see." Sarah stepped forward. Her simple dress, a stark contrast to the expensive suits surrounding her. She placed the charter on the table, her father's signature clearly visible at the bottom. "This is the original hospital charter, signed by my father, Robert Hayes." The board members exchanged glances. Mr. Richardson's face tightened. "That document is decades old. It has no bearing on current hospital policy." "Actually, it does." Nathan moved closer to the table, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "I've reviewed it with the hospital's legal team. This charter is legally binding. It specifically requires that all children receive care, regardless of their ability to pay." Sarah opened the folder, pointing to the crucial paragraph. "My father made sure this provision could never be removed or altered. It's written into the very foundation of this hospital." A murmur rippled through the room. Mr. Richardson's face flushed red. "Dr. Cole, your position here—" "My position?" Nathan cut him off, his voice rising. "Let me tell you about my position. 25 years ago, I was a poor kid with nothing but dreams and determination. Robert Hayes gave me a scholarship that put me through medical school." His hands gripped the back of a chair. "I buried that truth under years of pride and ambition. I became exactly what he fought against, someone who'd turn away a sick child because of money." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah watched their faces, seeing cracks appear in their corporate armor. "I owe everything I am to Robert Hayes' generosity," Nathan continued. "And I've failed him. We've all failed him. But today, we make it right." Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "The children's ward isn't just another department you can cut to save money. It's the heart of what my father built. Every child who walks through those doors carries the same hope he saw in Nathan all those years ago." She spread out additional documents they'd found. Photographs, letters, newspaper clippings. "Look at these. My father walking these halls, praying with patience, ensuring no one was turned away. This was his vision. This is our legacy." The board's legal counsel, a thin woman with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward to examine the charter. Her face grew serious. "Mr. Richardson, this document is indeed legally binding. The endowment specifications are quite clear. The funding cuts to the children's ward directly violate the charter's terms," Nathan added. "Every minute we delay reinstating those services puts us in legal jeopardy." Mr. Richardson's face had turned from red to pale. He looked around the table at his fellow board members, seeing the reality of their situation sink in. "There are children up there right now," Sarah said, her voice softening, "including my daughter, who need care. Children whose families are frightened and desperate, just like I was. Just like Nathan's family was, years ago." She met each board member's eyes. "Is this really who we want to be?" An older board member with silver hair cleared his throat. "I knew Robert Hayes, worked with him for 15 years. He looked down at his hands. He'd be heartbroken to see what we've become. We can't ignore this," another member added. "The legal implications alone." Mr. Richardson's shoulders sagged slightly. He looked at the charter, at the photographs of Robert Hayes helping patients, at Sarah standing tall in her father's hospital. The room fell silent, waiting. Finally, he spoke. "Call an emergency session. We'll draft a resolution to reinstate the children's ward funding immediately." He straightened his tie, attempting to maintain some dignity. "And we'll review all policies to ensure compliance with the original charter." Sarah's knees went weak with relief. Nathan steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The press release should acknowledge Robert Hayes' founding principles," Nathan added firmly. "The community needs to know this hospital is returning to its mission." The board members nodded, some looking almost relieved to have the decision taken out of their hands. Mr. Richardson began gathering his papers, a clear dismissal. But Sarah wasn't quite finished. She picked up her father's photograph from the table. "One more thing," she said quietly but firmly. "His portrait goes back in the lobby, where it belongs." Mr. Richardson gave a tight nod. "Of course, Miss Hayes. We'll see to it immediately." Sarah and Nathan turned to leave, the charter secure in her hands. They had done it. They had broken down walls of pride and greed with truth and compassion, just as her father would have wanted. As they reached the doors, the silver-haired board member called out, "Miss Hayes, your father would be proud of both of you." The monitors beeped steadily in Lily's hospital room as Sarah sat in the worn vinyl chair beside her daughter's bed. Her fingers were intertwined with Lily's small hand, thumb gently stroking the child's warm skin. The room felt different now, less threatening, more like a sanctuary of healing. Dr. Nathan Cole moved with careful precision as he adjusted Lily's 4-drip. Gone was the cold efficiency that had marked their first encounter. Instead, his movements were gentle, his expression soft with concern as he checked her vital signs. Sarah noticed how he took extra care not to disturb Lily's sleep, his actions speaking louder than any words of apology could. "Her temperature is still elevated," Nathan said quietly, "but the new antibiotics should start working soon." He made a note on her chart, then paused. "I've ordered additional tests, just to be thorough. We won't leave any stone unturned." Sarah nodded, grateful for his attention. "Thank you, Dr. Cole." The words came easier now, without the bitter taste they'd held before. "Please," he said, meeting her eyes. "Call me Nathan." He pulled up another chair and sat down, maintaining a professional distance but close enough to show he was fully present. "I want you to know that I'll be personally overseeing Lily's care until she's fully recovered." Through the window, late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the floor. A nurse came in to check Lily's temperature again, her movements efficient but caring. Sarah watched as the nurse smiled at Lily's sleeping form, tucking the blanket more securely around her small shoulders. "Your father would be proud," Nathan said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The way you fought for this place, for what's right, it's exactly what he would have done." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, but blinked them away. "I just wish," she paused, collecting herself. "I wish he could see her. He would have loved her so much." "He does," Nathan replied with unexpected gentleness. "Through you. Through every person who walks through these doors seeking help and finding it. That's his legacy. Your legacy now." Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, her face still flushed with fever but more peaceful than it had been in days. Sarah reached out to brush a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, feeling the heat still radiating from her skin. Hours passed like this, Sarah maintaining her vigil while Nathan checked in regularly, each visit marked by genuine concern rather than mere duty. The night shift brought new nurses, but the same attentive care continued. Sarah dozed occasionally but never left her post. Around midnight, Lily became restless, her small body fighting the fever that had gripped her for so long. Sarah sang softly to her, old lullabies her father used to sing when she was sick as a child. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, marking time in electronic pulses. Nathan returned during one of these moments, pausing in the doorway to listen to Sarah's gentle singing. He waited until she finished before entering with fresh test results. "The infection's responding to treatment," he reported, his voice carrying hope. "Her white blood cell count is improving." Sarah squeezed Lily's hand, drawing strength from the tiny fingers wrapped around her own. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered. "You can do this. Mommy's right here." The night deepened, and with it came that peculiar hospital quiet. The muted footsteps of nurses, the distant ding of elevators, the soft conversations at the nurses' station. Sarah found herself praying, not the formal prayers of church services, but the desperate, honest prayers of a mother's heart. "Please, God," she murmured, her head bowed over Lily's hand. "Please help my little girl." Nathan appeared again near dawn, his tie loosened but his attention sharp as ever. He checked Lily's vitals himself, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Her temperature's dropping," he announced quietly. Slowly, but steadily. Sarah held her breath, afraid to hope too much. But the numbers on the monitor confirmed his words. Over the next hour, she watched as color gradually returned to Lily's cheeks, replacing the feverish flush with a healthier glow. Then, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, Lily's eyes fluttered open. "Mommy?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Sarah's heart leaped. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." She leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. The skin was cool beneath her lips, and the tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. Nathan stepped forward to check Lily's temperature one more time, his smile now full and genuine. "Welcome back, young lady," he said warmly. "How are you feeling?" Lily considered this seriously. "Thirsty," she decided, bringing a chuckle from both adults. While Nathan went to get some ice chips, Sarah gathered her daughter into her arms, careful of the IV lines. She held Lily close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against her chest. "Thank you," Sarah whispered skyward, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for answered prayers." She rocked gently, feeling the weight of fear and worry finally lift from her shoulders. In that moment, she could almost feel her father's presence, in the healing that had taken place, in the compassion that had finally won out over cold efficiency, in the warmth of her daughter's embrace. Nathan returned with the ice chips, setting them quietly on the bedside table. He stepped back, giving mother and daughter space for their reunion, but his presence remained supportive and steady. A guardian of the healing that was his true calling, finally remembered. Lily snuggled closer in Sarah's arms, her fever broken, her recovery beginning. Morning light started to seep through the windows, painting the room in shades of hope and new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through the hospital lobby's glass windows, casting warm patterns across the polished floors. The space buzzed with excitement as dozens of people gathered for the official reopening of the children's ward. Colorful balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a banner stretched across the entrance read, "Hayes, Children's Ward, Healing for All." Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd, taking in the scene with misty eyes. Just a week ago, she'd rushed through these same doors with a desperately ill child and an empty wallet. Now, the lobby was filled with familiar faces, nurses who had secretly supported her, staff members who had shared stories of her father, and community members who had rallied to their cause. Lily, now fully recovered, bounced on her toes beside her mother, her dark curls neatly tied with ribbons. She tugged at Sarah's hand, pointing at the decorations. "Look, Mommy, there's Grandpa's picture." Sarah followed her daughter's gaze to the newly installed memorial wall. There, prominently displayed, was a large photograph of Robert Hayes. His kind eyes and gentle smile seemed to watch over the proceedings, just as he had done in life. Beneath the portrait, a brass plaque gleamed. "Founded by Robert Hayes, a home of healing for all." The head nurse, Martha, approached them with a warm smile.
"Sarah, everyone's waiting. Would you like to say a few words?"
Sarah squeezed Lily's hand and nodded. As they made their way through the crowd, people parted respectfully. Some reached out to touch her arm or whisper quick thanks. An elderly man with tears in his eyes told her, "Your father saved my grandson 20 years ago. We had no money, but he never turned us away." At the small podium near the reception desk, Sarah faced the gathering. Lily stood proudly beside her, wearing a little dress that matched her mother's. The crowd quieted, and Sarah saw Dr. Nathan Cole at the back, his usual stern expression replaced by something softer, more human. "My father," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady, "used to tell me that a hospital isn't just a building with beds and machines. It's a sanctuary of hope, a place where compassion matters more than profit." She paused, looking down at Lily. "When I brought my daughter here, I'd forgotten that. I felt small and powerless. But you, all of you, helped me remember." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sarah saw several nurses dabbing at their eyes with tissues. "Today, we're not just reopening a ward. We're recommitting to my father's vision. Every child who comes through these doors will receive care, regardless of their family's ability to pay. The Hayes Children's Ward will stand as a testament to what happens when we choose kindness over convenience and healing over profit." Applause erupted, echoing off the lobby walls. Lily beamed up at her mother, pride shining in her young face. As Sarah stepped away from the podium, people began to mingle, sharing refreshments and stories. Old-timers told tales about Robert Hayes to younger staff members. Parents whose children had been treated in the ward over the years hugged Sarah, thanking her for fighting to preserve its mission. Dr. Cole approached them, kneeling to Lily's level. "How are you feeling, Miss Hayes?" "Much better," Lily chirped. "Can I have another lollipop?" Nathan laughed, a sound that would have seemed impossible just days ago, and produced a cherry lollipop from his pocket. "Just don't tell the other patients I'm playing favorites." Sarah watched their interaction with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. The cold, dismissive doctor who had tried to turn them away was gone, replaced by a man who seemed to have rediscovered his calling. As the celebration continued, Sarah and Lily walked through the lobby arm in arm. The space felt different now, not just because of the decorations or the crowd, but because of the spirit that filled it. Every corner held memories of her father, but they no longer brought pain. Instead, they reminded her of the legacy she now carried forward. Staff members greeted them warmly as they passed. "Welcome home," one nurse called out, and others nodded in agreement. Even the security guard, who had once been instructed to watch Sarah, now tipped his hat respectfully. Lily skipped alongside her mother, stopping to admire the children's artwork that now decorated the walls. Each piece told a story of healing, hope, and gratitude. Sarah recognized some of the names on the drawings, children who had received care during the ward's darkest days, when the board had tried to shut it down. Near her father's portrait, an elderly volunteer who had known Robert Hayes approached them. "Your father would be so proud," she said, squeezing Sarah's hand. "You've brought his spirit back to these halls." Sarah felt tears welling up, but they were different from the ones she'd shed weeks ago. These were tears of joy, of belonging, of coming home. She looked around the lobby, at the faces of friends and strangers united in purpose, at the symbol of healing her father had built, at her daughter's bright smile, and knew that she had found her place again. Here, surrounded by the warmth of community and the echo of her father's legacy, Sarah finally felt the weight of uncertainty lift from her shoulders. The hospital was more than just a building or an institution. It was a living testament to the power of compassion, and she was now part of its continuing story. The celebration in the hospital lobby continued as staff members hung colorful welcome banners and arranged refreshments on long tables. Children's artwork, newly framed, adorned the walls. Each piece a testament to the young lives touched by Robert Hayes' legacy. Sarah stood near her father's restored portrait, watching Lily chat animatedly with a group of nurses who had cared for her. Dr. Nathan Cole emerged from the crowd, his usual pristine white coat replaced by a simple dark suit. His face, normally set in stern lines, had softened. He paused a few feet from Sarah, his hands clasped before him, shoulders slightly hunched, a posture so different from his previous commanding presence. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, using her formal name for perhaps the first time without a trace of condescension.
"May I speak with you?"
Sarah nodded, noting how he seemed to struggle to meet her eyes. The arrogant doctor who had dismissed her that first desperate night in the ER seemed like a stranger compared to the man before her now. "Your father," Nathan began, then cleared his throat. "Robert Hayes was more than just the founder of this hospital. He was a man who believed in people when they couldn't believe in themselves." He glanced around the lobby, taking in the celebration. "I was one of those people." Sarah watched as Nathan pulled an old, creased envelope from his jacket pocket. "I found this last night, going through my personal files. It's the letter your father wrote when he awarded me the scholarship that put me through medical school." His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the yellowed paper. "I was a poor kid from the wrong side of town. No one would give me a chance. But your father," Nathan's voice caught. "He saw something in me. He wrote here that he believed I had not just the mind of a healer, but the potential for a heart to match." Sarah felt her own eyes grow moist as Nathan continued. "I buried this letter away because it reminded me of where I came from. I was so determined to prove myself that I forgot the most important lesson your father taught, that true healing comes from compassion, not just competence." A nurse passed by with a tray of cookies, and Sarah watched as Lily waved enthusiastically at them both. Nathan managed a small wave back, then turned to Sarah with renewed purpose in his expression. "I want you to know that I'm going to honor your father's vision, not just with words, but with every patient I treat. No child will ever be turned away again. No parent will feel the shame and fear that I made you feel that night." He squared his shoulders. "I can't undo my past actions, but I can ensure his legacy lives on through better choices." Sarah could see the sincerity in his eyes, remembering how this same man had stood beside her in the boardroom, his voice ringing with conviction as they presented her father's charter. She recalled his gentle manner with Lily during her recovery, how he had stayed late checking on her progress, bringing her favorite flavored ice pops from the cafeteria. "Your father believed in second chances," Nathan continued softly. "He believed that people could change, could learn to open their hearts. I'm hoping you might believe that too." A memory flashed in Sarah's mind, her father's voice from long ago. Honey, sometimes the people who push others away the hardest are the ones who need compassion the most. She understood now what he'd meant, seeing the vulnerable humanity beneath Nathan's formerly rigid exterior. The children's ward needs a dedicated chief of pediatrics, Nathan said, straightening his tie nervously. Someone who understands both the medical and human side of healing. Someone who won't forget why we're here. He met her gaze directly. I'd like to take that position, but only with your blessing. This is your father's hospital, his dream. I want to be part of preserving that dream, not fighting against it. Sarah felt the weight of the moment, aware of the distance they'd traveled from that first hostile encounter. She saw in Nathan now what her father must have seen in that scholarship application years ago. Not just intelligence and drive, but the capacity for growth and change. The sounds of the celebration washed around them. Children's laughter, pleasant conversation, the soft strains of music from a small volunteer quartet in the corner. This was what her father had envisioned, a place of healing that welcomed all, where compassion and medical excellence worked hand in hand. Sarah extended her hand toward Nathan, a simple gesture bridging their past conflict. I think my father would be proud to see his investment in you finally bearing fruit, Dr. Cole. Nathan took her offered hand, his grip firm but gentle. Thank you, he said quietly. And in those two words, Sarah heard volumes. Gratitude, respect, and the promise of a new beginning. Their handshake sealed more than just a professional understanding. It marked the start of a fragile, respectful partnership built on shared commitment to Robert Hayes' enduring vision. Sunlight streamed through the hospital lobby's tall windows, casting a warm glow on the polished bronze plaque that had just been unveiled. Sarah Hayes stood before it, her daughter, Lily's small hand, tucked safely in hers. Her fingers traced the raised letters that spelled out her father's name. Founded by Robert Hayes, a home of healing for all. The morning light caught the fresh polish of the plaque, making it shine like a beacon. Sarah remembered how different things had been just weeks ago, when she'd rushed through these same doors with a feverish Lily in her arms. Now, the lobby buzzed with a different kind of energy, one of renewal and hope. It's so pretty, Mommy, Lily said, reaching up to touch the plaque with her free hand. Her fever had broken days ago, and color had returned to her cheeks. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with tiny daisies that her grandmother had given her. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, overwhelmed by the sight of her father's name restored to its rightful place. The old photograph beside the plaque showed him as she remembered best. Kind eyes crinkled at the corners, warm smile beneath his salt and pepper mustache, wearing his white doctor's coat as he stood among a group of children in the hospital garden. Your grandfather would have loved to meet you, sweetheart, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She knelt beside Lily, smoothing her daughter's dress. He built this place so that every child could get the care they needed. Nurses and doctors passed by, offering warm smiles and gentle nods. Some stopped to admire the plaque, sharing quiet memories of Robert Hayes with their colleagues. The atmosphere had changed dramatically since the board surrendered to the truth hidden in the original charter. Where there had been cold efficiency, now there was warmth. Where there had been calculated distance, now there was compassion. Dr. Nathan Cole approached them, his footsteps echoing on the lobby's marble floor. He'd traded his usual stern expression for something softer, more human. In his hands he carried a small potted plant, a peace lily. Good morning, Sarah. Hello, Lily, he said, crouching down to Lily's level. I thought this might look nice near your grandfather's plaque. Peace lilies are special. They help clean the air and make people feel better just by being around them. Lily's eyes lit up. Like what Grandpa did for people. Nathan nodded, a gentle smile crossing his face. Exactly like that. He stood and met Sarah's gaze. Your father gave me more than just a scholarship, Sarah. He gave me a chance to become someone who could help others. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Thank you for helping me remember. Sarah watched as Nathan carefully placed the peace lily on a small table beneath the plaque. The white flower seemed to glow in the morning light, its leaves reaching toward the sunshine streaming through the windows. Hospital staff had begun gathering in small groups nearby, sharing coffee and morning greetings. The lobby no longer felt like a cold, institutional space, but rather the welcoming sanctuary Robert Hayes had always intended it to be. Children's artwork decorated the walls, and comfortable chairs had replaced the rigid plastic seating. "Remember what you told me about Grandpa?" Lily asked, tugging at Sarah's sleeve. "How he used to walk around and talk to everybody." Sarah nodded, remembering the stories she'd heard from the nurses during their fight to save the children's ward. "He believed every person who came through these doors deserved to be treated with kindness, no matter who they were or what they could afford. Like how Nurse Jenny brings me extra Jell-O," Lily giggled. "Exactly like that, sweetheart." Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair, grateful for the staff who had shown such kindness during Lily's recovery. The morning sun climbed higher, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the lobby floor through the stained glass windows. Another of Robert Hayes' touches that the board hadn't managed to remove. Sarah remembered holding her father's hand as a little girl, watching those same colors paint the floor while he explained how beauty could help healing. Nathan had stepped back, giving them space, but remained nearby. He'd become a different person since their confrontation with the board, as if rediscovering his calling. Sarah had seen him sitting with patience, taking time to listen, bringing back the human touch that her father had considered essential to medicine. A group of children from the pediatric ward, accompanied by their nurses, made their way through the lobby for their morning walk. They waved excitedly at Lily, who had become something of a favorite during her stay. Their IV poles were decorated with colorful streamers, another tradition Robert Hayes had started, believing that even medical equipment could be made less frightening for children. Sarah felt tears welling up as she watched the children pass. Her father's vision hadn't just been about providing medical care. It had been about creating a place where healing touched the spirit as well as the body. Standing here now, seeing his name restored, feeling the warmth of the community he'd built, she knew his dream lived on. "Look, Mommy!" Lily pointed to where the morning light hit the plaque, making it seem to glow. "It's like the sun is giving Grandpa's name a hug." Sarah knelt beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around her. The lobby had filled with the soft sounds of morning activity, quiet conversations, gentle laughter, the distant chime of an elevator. It felt alive, warm, welcoming. Everything her father had wanted it to be. "You know what, Mommy?" Lily looked up at the plaque, then at the photograph of her grandfather. Her small face grew serious, thoughtful in that way that sometimes made her seem older than her 6 years. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, her heart full of love for this child who had never met her grandfather, but somehow carried his spirit of kindness. Lily squeezed her mother's hand and said softly, "Mommy, Grandpa must be smiling in heaven." Sarah's tears fell, not from sorrow but from overwhelming hope and joy. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Sarah Hayes, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.